Good morning, everyone. I'm Thierry Arys Ruiz. I'm the founder of TARCO International, and Agar.io is the flagship project of TARCO. So as mentioned before, I come from the commodity trading background. That's my passion. That's what I love. But then came the blockchain, and of course now I am dedicated to those two things. I always say, I'm trying to bring the best of Switzerland together, which is gold, banking, commodity trading, and now more recently blockchain. Merge them all together. I'm not going to pitch my book so much today because I want to talk more about the global scheme of things. So let's begin. So blockchain basics. Now, I'm not going to go through the blockchain basics again because I guess you've been through that about 1,000 times. Just raise your hands, anyone who doesn't know absolutely anything about blockchain. I see no hands raised whatsoever, so that already means something by itself, right? I still put that slide on because you probably know already that the blockchain will basically disrupt or change a lot of the current sectors. But I want to just mention an extra thing, which is the decentralization, the straight-through processing, and the automatization of data, and the fact that there is less human error and basically more trust, or a trustless, in a way, system. If you think of it in terms of what's going to happen in 10 years' time or even before, we don't know at what pace. Sometimes the technology is exponential. But think about what smart contracts can do, and think about what they can do if you add IoT and AI. So there's two things about it. One is that, well, it can be dangerous and we turn into Skynet and kind of like synergy with computers and so on. And then there is other ways to manage it. So I guess here, I'm not an expert, but time will tell. So what is my topic today is decentralization of government and money. So we're going to do it in 3 simple steps. One is the pillars of society. 2 is the taxonomy of money. Sounds complicated, but I'm going to see about it. And 3 is the decentralized organic consensus. All right, so what's the strategy and the vision, and what's our end goal? Well, it's basically to solve society's problem. Let's try to do it in 3 simple steps, okay? The first one is to redefine the 2 institutional pillars of society. The second is to redefine the financial system. And the third one is move society towards a decentralized organic consensus. What's the end goal? What are we trying to achieve? Well, shift the population upwards in the Maslow pyramid, essentially so that everyone can be better off. Yeah, so what are the pillars of society? Well, I don't know if you recognize those buildings, but one is the Tower of Basel, we call it. It's actually the Bank of International Settlements, based in Basel, Switzerland. And then the other one, so this is as centralized as you can do in terms of banking, okay? So this is the central banks of central banks. And then there is power, and there is an attempt of supranational power behind the idea of the UN, right? So let's go through 2 of the problems. How can we create a robust financial architecture? And here the proposition is to reform the financial infrastructure from the ground. Let's restart all together and provide a payment solution that can build the bedrock of an anti-fragile system. So what is an anti-fragile system? It's a system that is robust. Okay? And how can we move from centralized governance into decentralized consensus? And now we're using the idea behind the blockchain consensus in order to build society around it. And so here is this systemic migration of governments and money, in this sense, into a distributed ledger technology type of not only philosophy but way of handling things. So that's the proposition. Okay, so we start first with money and fractional reserve. The big problem with the financial system is fractional reserves. What this does essentially is it increases the leverage and it increases the amount of debt, and ultimately the result is a very big monetary mass. And you see basically financial experimentation from central banks as well into things like quantitative easing, negative interest rates, asset purchases. But all of this as a result really has quite an impact. One of them is moral hazard. Why moral hazard? Well, because there is a group of people who decide what the price of certain assets are, essentially. So there is no free market anymore. The second one is the misdistribution of wealth, and we've all heard about 99% versus 1%, and not only that, but like now it's almost like the 99th percentile. And what does this do? What's the effect? Well, it's essentially an increasing volatility, because if we go back to the fractional reserve system, if you push it to the extreme, which we have, a withdrawal of only 5% of the cash in the banks would have a ripple effect into essentially collapsing the system. And because of the increasing leverage, a small movement in one place can have butterfly effect repercussions. And so that's why it increases volatility, and that's why it doesn't make the system more robust but more fragile. Because now we see that essentially a cyclical risk or a cyclical downfall due to normal business cycles can have now an impact on the whole system. So cyclical risk can turn into systemic risk now because of the amount of leverage in the market. So what are the tools left? Well, most of the times, and most of the academics and people who've been on the Keynesian side of economics, they've usually came up with more of the same, essentially. And more of the same, well, in my view and a lot of other people's view, will only increase the moral hazard and just produce more problems than solutions in the end. Okay? So, what is AGAL? AGAL, AG for silver, AU for gold, a token backed by silver, a token backed by gold. It's a one-to-one system, so that there is no fractional reserve, right? And I call it a true alternative to fiat. Now, think about it. I'm not reinventing the wheel here, okay? Gold has been money for thousands of years. So all we do is take the things that work and then transform them into today's society. These are fancy charts just to show you how we're positioning ourselves. So there's a very popular speech from Mark Carney, the governor of the Bank of England, showing essentially this piece of the chart, where he says that what is money? Money is a store of value, a medium of exchange, and a unit of account. Right? We can also argue that maybe money is not so much of a good store of value given the inflation, and it really depends on where you are in society, right? What country, what central bank is deciding for you of the price of money. But what we're trying to achieve here is to essentially go back to the gold standard and create a true alternative to fiat. What is fiat? Is a money that is not backed by anything. And now you go back to Satoshi Nakamoto and his ideas. We're trying to create an alternative to fiat. But a true alternative to fiat can only be an alternative if it's backed by something, meaning there is intrinsic value. And I think, and this is my personal opinion, that if Satoshi could have done that, he would have. Right? So on this chart, that's the taxonomy of money that we've worked with Hadi, who's here. He's doing a master in economics, very smart person, and we have redefined the money spectrum. Now think about what Bitcoin is, and Bitcoin is on the right-hand side. It's a peer-to-peer cash electronic system. In this case, that is also outside of the public realm. So you see Bitcoin there. Now we add another factor on this, which is the convertibility, right? And we're positioned there, meaning it's a peer-to-peer cash electronic system, but that is not within the public realm, meaning it's not run by the government. Okay, so going back to what money is, gold has been money for thousands of years. Okay, you go back 3,000 years ago. And why is it gold? Well, because it's the only material element that is immutable within time. In other words, it was immutable before immutable was cool. All right? And gold is anti-fragile because anti-fragile means that the more you test it, the more it becomes robust. The more you test gold as a form of money, the more it comes back and it gets stronger. Now, I love the idea of Satoshi. I love the idea of an alternative to the current fiat system. Right? What is the problem? The problem is that crypto is not technologically stress resistant. So what that means is there is better technology that will be coming up. In other words, in a thousand years, what is your Bitcoin going to be worth? There's going to be a better technology. I mean, even now, you have Bitcoin Cash, you have tons of other cryptos who are trying to achieve that. But what I'm trying to say here is that in 10 years' time, it could very well be that the technology would move, and hopefully it will move, because we want to progress in society. We want to have better technology. We don't want it to get stuck with an ancient technology before. So it's not technologically resistant. And it's not an alternative to fiat because it's not backed by anything. And if anything, I come from the commodity trading world. The only way I could justify this is it's backed by the resources it takes to pull it out of the ground. When you're talking about mining, you speak about what's the cost of 1 ounce of gold, and you say, okay, there's 10 grams per metric ton, and it costs you about $1,000 to create an ounce of gold out of the ground. And Bitcoin is pretty much the same. What's the cost? Well, it's the software, it's the hardware you put, and the energy you put. And the cost of mining will define, basically. But when you think about it, you say, okay, but is it not then just a waste of resources, right? And some people argue this for gold as well. They say, well, why would you take a rock out of the ground and then consider it money? So the argument still stays there. Only one is a material, physical thing that will remain. The other one, we don't know, because of the supposition is that it's not technologically stress resistant. It doesn't have 3,000 years of backing behind it. So following up on this, one of the use cases is the emerging economies. All right, so it's banking the unbanked. And this is not only my coin, this is tons of other coins. And I think this is what the whole crypto society is trying to achieve anyways. The only thing is we're trying to do a stable coin so that there's no volatility. So what does that mean? That the people in Venezuela or the people in Turkey right now, they can't have an alternative to the current money system. Even the people in Benin who do not have even themselves the power over the monetary system, because they use the franc CFA, which is run by the French, who are then now run by the ECB. They don't have the power over their money anyways. So for them, an alternative like that wouldn't change much, right? And then you have the transparency of pricing, meaning you price everything in gold and silver. Everyone knows what the price of gold and silver is. So that means you don't need to have FX rate. Why would you change to another currency or not? So you will see people in one country saying, well, my artisanal good is a chair, and I sell it for 2 Agao silver tokens, and someone else in Europe will say, well, my chair, I sell it for 4 Agao tokens. So who is more competitive, right? This allows actually emerging markets to trade worldwide. Some of these people don't have a bank account. There's 2 billion people who are unbanked. It basically opens an alternative financial system for them. Okay, so we're going to use this to switch into the governance side of things. So the governance side of things is, the problem here is populism, right? The problem here is stuff for free, right? And stuff for free, I can give you stuff for free if I take debt. And if I take debt, well, most of the times, if you in your personal life take debt, and you take too much of it, then you basically become a prisoner of your debt. And it's just the same thing for countries. And debt is the intrinsic part of the fractional reserve system as well. This is what leverages the whole thing up. So what is the alternative to that? Well, the alternative to that is more responsibility. Right? Don't give responsibility to your government, take back the responsibility. Right? And not only individual responsibility, but also not transferring the responsibility. Because what happens if you all transfer your responsibility to me? Well, there is a chance I will abuse your trust. Right? So that's why the decentralized system and the consensus is better. And of course, accountability. That means that now that you take back responsibility, you take full responsibility, which means you take the benefits, but you also take the costs. And that's being a good father, right? That's being a responsible person. So, and also, what's the thing with the blockchain? Well, it's more transparency. And more transparency in government, that means less corruption. And I think we would all agree on that. So, we're here in Switzerland, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, because I always say I vote with my feet and I vote with my wallet. With my feet, meaning where I go, and with my wallet, meaning where I put my money in. And when you really think of that, people do that all the time. When you see crisis in Syria, they vote with their feet. They say, enough of this, I'm moving out. Right? I want to go in a place where I feel myself that the society has the same mentality as me. And so far discovered, at least for me in my experience, I did 10 countries before I ended up here. I'm from Mexico, and I know about corruption. So what is the unique selling point of Switzerland is, well, it's direct democracy. Okay, so if you go to school in Switzerland, you learn that the executive power executes. They're employees, they're government employees, and they're to the service of the people. That's what they should be. You see, the legislative power is outside the executive power. The legislative power is who makes the laws, and the laws are proposed and voted by the people, for the people. That's what sovereignty means, right? And then you have the enforcement of that, and the enforcement of that is the judiciary process. All right? So this is GoFundMe, right? It's private sector, basically. So what are we trying to achieve with Meritocracy.ngo? And it will be launched next week. So meritocracy is the idea that you build a democratic system where the best ideas win. And you're judged on the basis of merit and not on the basis of your political clout. So voluntarism is one big part. You can only engage into a contract by free will. And I think everyone who knows about the blockchain and the mentality behind it knows what I'm talking about. And it's also anti-populism. So now, how do you achieve anti-populism? That's a very interesting point. Because if I come out here and I say, guys, I will give you a golden roller coaster, a golden Ferrari for everyone, and a magical, wonderful amusement park, then everyone could vote for me because it seems like a good idea. But if I put the cost and I say, okay, we can do that, everyone can have a Ferrari, but at the end of the month, you will all pay 50,000 bucks. Well, maybe you don't want it anymore. Whereas if I say, well, we all get insurance, basic coverage, but it all costs you 100 francs, then maybe you're more inclined because you're bearing the cost, you're bearing the benefits. So in this sense, if you put in the platform of proposing the laws, the cost on the federal level, on the cantonal level, and on the taxpayer level, then you know what you're paying for. And I encourage everyone in their countries to ask the government, how much am I paying for the service you're providing? And you'll be surprised about the amount of money that is wasted throughout the process. So, what is this decentralized organic consensus? Well, it's not something I invented. This is basically nature. Okay, it's the free market. Is this the invisible hand? No. But essentially, the idea behind it is what is already happening. But this time, you put it in a system stir. So I don't know what's going to happen, because essentially what will happen regardless is that nature will be more strong than anything else. And what we're trying to do here is precisely to try to figure out the laws of nature. I'm talking a bit like a Mensa here, but it's trying to codify the laws of nature, knowing that we don't know anything about them. So you need to have the flexibility so that the system can organically grow and evolve, right? But I think there's two things that we really need to decide as a society for which we would be much better off. One is to not have a central authority, because it's always better to combine our brains. And the second is to be fair. And here we're going down a path that can be divergences, right? What is fair, right? So I think one of the things we need to do is precisely that, define our principles as society, and to be as decentralized as possible so that we don't end up with some sort of a dictatorship, and have some sort of constitutional setup so that there is certain laws we cannot break. For example, free will and the fact that voluntarism should prevail, so that you don't imprison people against their will into making choices that they don't want to make. So that's it. That's what I was trying to convey today. And I will just finish with our motto, which is, we shall stand on principle, or we shall not stand at all. Thank you very much.